So whose performance does this Vikings season rest on? I got 5 answers for you. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. And I appreciate you all so very much. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out. You can find this show wherever you find your favorite podcasts, whether that is an audio listening app. You can just search out Locked On Vikings or even Amazon Fire and Roku. If you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app, you can find the show on YouTube as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today on the show, I got a nice little listicle for you. We're doing great. So I wanted to go over the Vikings X factors. Who are the kind of hinging players, the load-bearing columns of the Vikings? And when I use X factor, I think when people do like an X factor thing, a lot of times they all mean a different thing. So what I mean by X factor is a player who has a wide range of outcomes from good to bad. That could go anywhere from being cut to like being a star starter. And a player where the answer to that question of what's going to happen is really important. And I think one of the wider range of outcomes on the Vikings, he's not going to get cut, but still a very wide range of outcomes, is Sam Darnold. He's probably the most important X factor on the Vikings. That's probably a really boring answer. Not exactly the hottest take, but I'm not here to give you hot takes. I'm here to give you what I think is correct. And I think it's pretty hard to argue against Sam Darnold as the biggest X factor on the Vikings. But like examining the kind of the floor and the ceiling there, right? Like there is the worst case scenario for Darnold, I think, is one where he is so bad that he gets benched before JJ McCarthy is ready. And then you're either putting in Nick Mullins, which sends a terrible signal about J.J. McCarthy, even if that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And what you should do if McCarthy isn't ready, that kind of thing can still get in someone's head. And if you remember the Everyman series we did on J.J. McCarthy, the noise has gotten in his head in the past and is something that he works really hard to keep out. So then, you're going to immediately challenge that process. Or you're putting in JJ McCarthy before he's ready, and that's a terrible idea for its own reasons. So that's the worst case scenario for Darnold. Statistically, I don't know what that looks like. I think it has more to do with patience and narrative and all that. But even if he's like just a little bad, he's just like kind of bad, he's just, he's not very good, but it's okay. He can still captain this thing to 2-8 while JJ McCarthy gets ready, and we can just call this season a wash. Like that is still acceptable. It's the Donovan McNabb scenario is not acceptable. The 2021 Andy Dalton, oh God, we got to put Justin Fields in and ruin him. That is what we cannot afford to do here, because if you put in McCarthy before he's ready, and please bookmark this, please clip this, please make a clip of this and put it in your important reminders folder. All right. If JJ McCarthy goes in before he is ready, everything that you have worked on this whole year reverts back to who he was in college. And college quarterbacks don't work in the NFL. College quarterbacks become NFL quarterbacks. They don't just stroll onto the field and do it. Everybody improves on something. Even the guys that went week 1, they change footwork a little bit. And if you try to just waltz into the NFL as a college quarterback, Bryce Young. I think that the Panthers and Josh McCown, which I'm a little concerned about, just tried to sort of run back what Bryce Young did at Alabama, mixed with weird offensive structure, right? And it turned into this super anemic thing. But I think part of that was that they didn't really change the way that he dropped back, and the Vikings actually specifically attacked the way that he dropped back. Harrison Smith came out and talked about it much later as like, we knew that he dropped back this way, which meant he was going to be blind to this. He was going to be vulnerable to this particular angle. And that was there in college, and they didn't try to fix it. So that version of stuff, we're trying to fix that with McCarthy, but if you put it under stress before it's muscle memory, you lose it. And you're going to go back to what your muscle memory is, which is your old college habits. We do not want that. We do not want, and I don't come crying to me week 4 when the Vikings are 1-3. Hey, should we put in McCarthy even if he's not ready? Don't come to me with that. We don't want that. And then on the other side of things, there's the world where Sam Darnold is so good that you question if maybe he shouldn't be the starter at all. Moving forward, right? Hey, wait, what about an extra year on his contract or something? He can earn an extra contract. I don't think that that's realistic, but we're talking about ceilings. I think a more realistic, like positive outcome for him is the one where he plays well enough to earn a good contract with someone else. Like if he gets a 2-year deal with someone else as the starter, that means that's the best I think he can do. And I don't think that will be with the Vikings. And I don't think I don't think Darnold expects it to be with the Vikings. I don't think the Vikings expect it to be with the Vikings. He is here for 1 year. He's here to be a bridge, and everybody is okay with that. But either way, the success or failure of the Vikings rests on that. If Darnold can play well enough to take the job for the whole year, and then like earn another contract somewhere else. If he plays that, then the Vikings probably had a pretty good year. And if he plays so bad that it's a McNabb situation and McCarthy has to go in and like ruin all his habits because he played so poorly for the first 4 weeks, then it's probably not going to be a good year for the Vikings. So that's probably the biggest X factor, but that's a boring answer. So let me give you 4 other ones. Maybe a more off the beaten path answer and not nearly as impactful as Darnold, but definitely a wider range of outcomes belongs to Jaylen Naylor. Jaylen Naylor, and kind of everybody, Sherfield, Powell, everybody in that sort of wide receiver depth category. But Jaylen Naylor has every opportunity to be wide receiver 3. He was pushing for that job last year. Maybe would have gotten it if he didn't get hurt. And Powell had a great camp, so that might have been, that could have been a really exciting camp battle. And now it's a true camp battle for that job that Powell currently holds. But there's also the world where, like, what happened to him at the end of last year wasn't just about injury. This was the deal. We talked about this on Minnesota Football Party a little bit. The deal with him when he came back from injury is he was in clear-out jail. He very rarely ran true, like, in the progression routes, relatively. Like, so much of his stuff was either on the backside of the concept, so it's just going to be hard for him to even, for the progression to even make it over there, because usually Justin Jefferson is on the front side of the concept, and by the time he came back, that JJ was back. So if JJ is on the concept, on the front side of the concept, that means JJ has to be declined. It's a hard thing to do. You're not going to necessarily want to go through that. And then you also have to say no to Hawkinson or Addison or whoever else was over there. And quarterbacks didn't do that a lot. Those guys dominated the target share. So you had to go through those guys, and you had to decide to throw it to Jaylen Naylor. I think he got 1 target in the whole season. And so the question is, why? Was it just you were injured? You were trying to, you were just coming, you had missed so much. We'll get you on the field, we'll get your feet wet a little bit, but because you've missed all this momentum, we're going to let the actual game plan be executed by people who have been here? Or is it, wow, we were excited about you in camp, but we just have not seen that. Congratulations, you're wide receiver 5. Good luck making the team next year. If it's the latter, that's the world we live in, where it's the latter, and then Naylor has a bad camp, let's say. Yeah, there's nothing keeping him there, right? And that's the way I want to approach all of these kind of roster conversations is, okay, what happens if he has an awesome camp? Oh, well, he's wide receiver 3. Shoot, maybe he's wide receiver 2 if Addison's suspended. Or if he has a really bad camp, must we roster him if he like really stinks it up in camp and he gets outplayed by Sherfield and Tristan Jackson and all those other guys? Absolutely not, right? Like you would keep the players who played better. That has to be the logic. It's not like he's a first round pick and he's got the pedigree that kind of locks him into the roster. Not at all for Naylor. So that's 2 of my X factors. I got 3 more left to go over. So we'll do that. And one of them is just an Everyman Series entry. So we'll get to that next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. This summer, they have a new deal every single day, some kind of boost or deal or special or whatever. Just go to FanDuel.com every day and check it out. They've got all kinds of new stuff all the time, and it changes every single day. So whether you're trying to get in on an NFL future, like Justin Jefferson over under 1,300.5 yards, if you think he will have more than 1,300 yards, which he has accomplished in every full season that he has played, and he probably would have got that last year after 3 additional games, if he had just come back from his hamstring that much earlier. So that is one over-under that I particularly like, assuming he stays healthy all year, or if you want to bet on a Lynx game or a Twins game. There's plenty of sports going on as well. So go to FanDuel.com and check out what they've got going on. FanDuel, make every moment more. Moving on here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Thank you so much for hanging out. When you're done here, go check out Locked On Minnesota Sports for more Minnesota sports talk each and every day. Next up, I want to flip to the defensive side of the ball for the next X factor that I want to talk about. It is Shaquille Griffin. It is really hard to nail down what to expect from Shaquille Griffin, because I've seen plenty of veteran corners with starting experience show up for camp once they're in their journeyman phase, and Shaq Griffin is, right? He was a bona fide starter for Seattle, but now he's in his Jacksonville, and then a minute in Houston, he's a journeyman. He's a journeyman starter, but journeyman starters are one bad practice away from becoming journeyman backups. And we have seen that happen in Minnesota plenty with people with that like very similar pedigrees. So I feel like the range of outcomes here is gigantic, right? Again, think about what happens if Shaq Griffin has an awesome camp. He's the star of camp. Okay, well, he gets the starting role, and what if he's just really good? And that could make a massive impact on the Vikings, who really need that help at cornerback, right? But what if he has a bad camp? What happens to him? Do you cut Shaq Griffin if he has a bad training camp? Almost all of Griffin's $4 million contract is guaranteed, so I think him getting cut is probably a difficult sell. It sounds like that's not something you do if you plan to like have him in a roster competition. Like compare that contract to Dalton Reisner's, right? Dalton Reisner's has like incentives for if you make the roster, and very limited guarantees. They have guaranteed enough money to Shaq Griffin where they very much intend to keep him there. They could trade him and save a bunch of money, but not all of it. They still have $2.4 million in a signing bonus, so I doubt that there's a cut, but there is super definitely a world where he loses his starting job. And if he just has a dreadfully bad camp, that doesn't necessarily mean that one of the young guys stepped up, like Evans or Booth or Blackman. But one of those guys would get the job, and then if that guy struggles, like it could just be the terribly weak position we're all expecting it to be. But if Griffin has this great camp, it could change the entire texture of the defense. And I think there's a lot of Rorschach going on with just how you view it. I'm a little bit more skeptical on corners. I've been watching the Vikings have dreadfully bad cornerback play for 4 years now. This will be the 5th. They had Patrick Peterson, but then we've seen plenty of Andrew Booth catastrophes. We saw that a lot of Dantzler and Breland and, just Holton Hill, like just ever since the Rhodes and Waynes duo left simultaneously, the Vikings have had horrifically bad, like bottom 5 corner play. And it's all been like reclamation projects. So maybe that's my skepticism leaking out where I'm like, I don't know exactly if like we can expect this guy. My brain can't get outside of Joejuan Williams getting starts with the ones and everybody being like, oh my God, is he a starter only for him to get cut? So we'll see. And I think when I get in that kind of place with somebody, the healthiest thing to do is say, I'll believe it when I see it. And if everybody sees it in camp, and then great, I'll believe it. Then I'll be right on the train with everybody else, but give me some empirical evidence. That will change a lot about the defense, but I thought through the defense, and I do have one more X factor on the defense, but he's going to be an every man series entry. But really what I thought was like a lot of these guys, we know what we're going to get from Byron Murphy, right? Like Byron Murphy's not an X factor to me, because I don't think that there's a world where he has a really bad camp and like it changes the depth chart. He is locked in. And it goes the same for somebody like Grenard. Dallas Turner could have a really bad camp and not start, but you're never going to cut him. He could have a really good camp and play, and that would be really impactful. But all of those guys on defense that I thought about are either too proven, like Metellus or Bynum, to really feel like I'm seeing this great range of outcomes, or like if Dallas Turner isn't good, you still have Van Ginkel and Grenard, right? So like the impact is mitigated another way. So my brain went back to offense, and I thought, what the big variable is right now is what's going to happen with Jordan Addison. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. A lot of people asked those questions about what will happen if there's a suspension or something like that. But if there is a suspension of Jordan Addison to begin the season, if it gets done quickly, then you might have a week, 2, 3 would be standard with Justin Jefferson and the next most prolific pass catching weapon being Brandon Powell. That could be really impactful to start the season. That could be go make another transaction. That could be go trade a draft pick for somebody, or even trade a player at a deeper position and try to get a receiver back. Somebody's got to step up. I mean, you're like one twisted ankle away from Lucky Jackson snaps to start the season. If you've got an Addison suspension, the same time you have a Hawkinson injury that he's coming back from, you're running 3 tight ends, you're going to try to do the wrong. I mean, that's bleak. But there is also a world where Jordan Addison changes the texture of the Vikings offense, where he has his breakout year. Now, he had almost 1,000-yard season last year, and it was a very good season for a rookie. Undeniably hit on the draft pick, at least on an on-field perspective. Obviously, the off-field is very concerning, but I did want to touch on one other thing there. I saw some people calling for the Vikings to cut him. And I'm not here to tell you that, whether or not you're being too mad about Jordan Addison getting a DUI. That is between you and your mirror, none of my business. But what I will say about that particular call is that it's not a very helpful suggestion to do. If the Vikings were to cut Jordan Addison because of this, he would get claimed instantly on waivers, and the team that claimed him on waivers is not going to care about that. He would be suspended for as long as he's suspended for, and then he would go have a 1,000-yard season for them. He would get the same amount of money, wouldn't cost him a dime to get cut. The other team would pick up all of his all of the rest of his rookie contract. The Vikings would just be left with a dead cap hit and watching a scoreboard as his stats go up and the Vikings fall to 4-13. I mean, it would just kind of be cutting off your own nose to spite your face. And maybe a better way to put that is cutting Jordan Addison over this would not punish Jordan Addison. It would punish the Vikings. And the Vikings didn't do anything wrong here. That is why the process is left up to the league, an unbiased fixture. Theoretically unbiased. They've got their own biases, but they're not the ones we're talking about. I'll put it that way. If the Vikings were the ones that were left to decide the punishment for Jordan Addison, obviously they'd be heavily incentivized to look the other way and say, yeah, but we want you on Sunday because we want to go beat the Giants week 1. So I don't know. I don't think that is helpful. And that's just highly unrealistic. That's just not what happens in these cases, like ever. Even if this one like particularly pisses you off because of Kyrie Jackson, which, hey, I ain't going to tell you not to do that. But if you are looking for a productive thing to come out of this, or if you're just looking for punitive justice, you just are going to have to live with whatever suspension the NFL hands down, and however long that takes, that's what you're going to get. These cases are almost always pled down when it comes to somebody with as much money as Addison has and all that. You're not going to get him behind bars over it or anything like that. And you're going to probably get a 3-game suspension. You have to decide how mad you are about that, but don't be surprised by it. And in terms of the Vikings themselves, adding something additional onto that, like they will just say, okay, yep, we support what the league did, and that's what we think is the right punishment as well. And then that's going to be that, and it'll be over. And you just have to decide how mad you are. There's one more X factor left. We got through 4. I wanted to go through a 5th, but instead of just talking about Blake Cashman's play on the field, who I do think is an X factor for the Vikings, let's go over his entry into the Everyman series. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by LinkedIn. Fall is coming up. Fall is a big hiring time, especially because of all the college kids that are coming out of like summer programs or who graduated in the spring. And LinkedIn Jobs can help you find exactly who is perfect for that role that just opened up for you. It's not just a job board, though. It helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a job, but might be really interested in yours, maybe leaving their job for your job. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you want to get access to candidates, you're going to have to find them on LinkedIn and LinkedIn only. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many different hats, especially if you are the person in charge of hiring. That's probably not your only job, and they want to make things easier for you to save you that time, energy, because, hey, we all know time is money. Keep that in mind. That's going to come up later. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Blake Cashman has a whole bunch of tattoos on his arm. There is a fantastic piece at the Star Tribune that goes over the meaning of all of them, which is a framing device we've encountered before, and it's a very good one. It gets me every time. I'm a sucker for it. Or I apologize. That is an Associated Press article. The Strib article is also good. I'll link them both in the show notes. Please yell at me if I forget. But one of the tattoos on his arm says, "Live today. Tomorrow's not promised." This is a lesson that Blake Cashman has learned the hard way over and over again in his football career, which, as you are probably familiar with, started in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. If you're not from Minnesota, Eden Prairie is like the Patriots of Minnesota high school football, at least in the metro area. They win all kinds of championships. They're like one of the best programs in the state. His dad played sports at St. Thomas Academy, and he actually almost took a scholarship there when he was coming out of Eden Prairie. He was not the most highly recruited guy that has ever come out of Eden Prairie. Tons of NFL players have come out of there. He is one of them eventually, but you wouldn't have guessed it based on the attention he got from recruiters. If he wanted to take a scholarship, he was going to have to go D3. He was talking to MSU Mankato. He was talking to St. Thomas, almost took that to play football and basketball. And there is actually like an alternate universe where, like a lot of these players, where he actually takes the basketball thing into, more seriously and goes that route, maybe goes pro that way or whatever. But he also gets a visit with the University of Minnesota. And the University of Minnesota wasn't going to offer a scholarship. They were going to say you can do a preferred walk-on thing, which is essentially like calling them a priority undrafted free agent. If you're not familiar with the high school to college recruiting pipeline, that's basically UDFA status. That is, you're going to come on, you're going to try to make the team, and if you do, you get a scholarship, and if not, well, you're just paying full price to attend the University of Minnesota. Congratulations. Which, hey, that's not so bad. You still kind of got into a school, right? But the attitude of that conversation is not very easy. And so recruiters will often talk about how, like, look, every kid walks into that meeting thinking, oh my God, I'm meeting with the U of M. They're going to give me a scholarship. And then they tell you, yeah, we're not going to do that. And it can be difficult, right? And seeing how the kid reacts can sometimes be instructive. For Cashman, I think he kind of knew that the D1 school wasn't going to be, this is the only D1 school, and then that I wasn't going to get an offer, right, from a way better school than all the other ones that have been considering me. So he's just happy that they're offering him an opportunity. And he immediately, I think, has the mindset that he needs to turn this into something. Ultimately, he will accept the preferred walk-on offer at the University of Minnesota. He'll pop into their summer program. And about 2 weeks into the summer program, he kind of realizes, oh, I'm not outmatched here at all. I actually belong here. Maybe I was really under-recruited, and actually this is going to work out for me. It's coming easier to him than he expected it to. I think he had almost too healthy of expectations. A couple of weeks in, there's actually a great video. The University of Minnesota did a video when he got his scholarship of him. He's in like the U of M meeting room, and he kind of like opens the note that says that he's going to get a scholarship, and his whole team just like mobs him, and everybody's super happy for him. It's really cute. Big sucker for that kind of stuff. So he ends up getting his scholarship, the D1 scholarship. He ends up finding his way to it by taking a risk and betting on himself. His freshman year, he's actually going to play And it's not all that common for freshmen to play, right? So he's very excited. He's playing special teams. He's playing a reserve role, but like, that's a lot. That's awesome. He fondly remembers his first game, which was, I think this was 2015. This was Gophers against TCU. And he mostly was just like doing punt coverage. And he was like really nervous. And he really cared, right? It was my first college game. He really had the butterflies, which he'll laugh. He talked about this in an interview all the way when he was with the Texans. So this was many years into his pro career. It's kind of funny being nervous now. He's like all very used to that kind of pressure. But hey, college D1, like this is a lot. They will lose that game. And this was a dark period for the Gophers. So the locker room at the time was not taken that loss very hard. They were kind of used to losing. People were still happy-go-lucky and whatever. It's not that big a deal. And Blake Cashman was pissed off. And he was pissed off that everybody else wasn't pissed off. Unfortunately, that competitive spirit gets held back a lot. And really the meat of Blake Cashman's story is in the rehab room. He'll deal with shoulder issues throughout his college career, but he'll still get drafted. He'll go to the Jets. And then his rookie year, he gets injured on what else but a punt coverage rep. He will take that on what else but a punt coverage rep. Like, of course it is, the place where he got his start. And that is now this very comfortable place that he's been doing this now for 4 years. And that's where he gets injured. And he works really hard to come back from that. And later that season, he'll get injured. He'll pull his hamstring, and that'll end his season, like December of that season. That was 2019. He was by 2020, he was still a backup. He's a 5th-round pick. But the guy in his way, CJ Mosley, actually opts out because of coronavirus, totally opening the path to a starting job for him. And it's kind of funny when you think about how COVID affected everybody's career, right? You know, I always say, then things got unprecedented and it made something weird. It messes with someone's draft process if they were coming out that year. You know, it messes if they were at a smaller school and they didn't get that college season or something like that, or it just changes things a little bit. But sometimes it opens up an opportunity. If you're the guy that dropped out of the season because, you know, you didn't want to play in the pandemic year, somebody else got an opportunity to start in your place. And that somebody else was Blake Cashman. But he got hurt. And he spends a lot of time in the rehab room. He'll get hurt again in 2021. He will work and work and work to get back after that 2020 season into that pandemic year where he has that option to start, that chance to start. But it starts to really eat at him. And we've talked a whole bunch on this. I mean, we've gone over a lot of players, and many of them have gotten injured and gone through this where they have to apply this patience that's so difficult to apply because the mentality that gets you to the NFL is just, I'm going to outwork all of my problems, right? If I'm not good at this, I'm going to, you know, if I'm dropping passes, I'm going to go catch 200 balls on the jugs machine. If I'm not getting my QB reads right, I'm going to go study the playbook till 4 a.m. You can work super hard and really attack everything with like a vigor and solve all these problems, but injuries don't work that way. If you attack it too hard, you can re-aggravate it, you can make all these problems. So you have to learn this patience. And then you also have to forgive yourself for not going super hard at the thing. And that's the part that gets Blake Cashman, where he starts to really doubt. And it's so easy for that doubt to creep in when your teammates are all practicing and blood, sweat, and tears and working their tail ends off, and you're in the rehab room with your leg elevated, you know, icing it. It just doesn't feel right. And it's the right thing to do. It is truly, but it's really easy to convince yourself that you're doing something wrong because it's taking too long, especially the second or third time you get injured. So when he goes down in 2021, it's emotionally devastating for him. It's also devastating for his relationship to the New York Jets. That'll be it for him after 2021. He gets traded to the Texans. They've basically moved on from him. They've had to come up with other ways because he's been hurt all the time. But it was truly just bad luck. That's the other cruel thing about this, is injuries. It's really easy to find patterns in them. And, you know, he falls victim to something that happens to us all the time, right? A player gets hurt once, twice, 3 times. You go, this guy's injury prone, and then he doesn't get injured again for 5 years and becomes a probable Ring of Honor candidate. That was Kyle Rudolph. Y'all remember that? He missed 8 games in a year for 3 years running, and everybody called him a fragile player. And then he just was like an Iron Man for the rest of his career because he was just unlucky for those 3 years. But because it happened consecutively, we ascribe a pattern to it, and we'd have to put meaning on that somehow because that's how our lizard brains work. And Cashman had done that to himself, but he says, and then I was blessed with better luck in Houston. He blossoms under the DeMeco Ryans scheme there. And then he gets to actually, no pun intended, cash in on all of this success, finally. So here in Minnesota, this is the first time in his career that he isn't like fighting for recognition, whether it's being a walk-on at the U of M or a 5th-round pick just trying to make the team in New York and prove that he wasn't, an injury-prone, fragile guy when he got to Houston. Here, you're just kind of the anointed starter. It's never happened for him before. He did get the extension in 2023. He was on the last year of his deal in 2022. He got a 1-year extension in 23. But here, he's like one of the bigger free agents that we got. And that's a totally different context than he's ever seen before in his career, something he earned by finally staying healthy for a couple of years and showing what he can do. And whether or not he lives up to that hype is going to have a huge impact on the Vikings defense because he's probably going to be out there every single rep as the Jordan Hicks replacement. And if you listened to me last year, you know just how pivotal that position can be for better or worse. I'll see you all tomorrow. And as always, Skull.